Today on Aphantasia Meow, I'm going to be talking about the new eCourse that I just launched, open for registration now, and the case study participant results that we did back in April. So stay tuned.
Meow.
Okay, so welcome back to the channel. I'm really excited to talk about this stuff today. And before I get to the case study results and all that, I know some of you are probably looking forward to hearing how that went. That took place back in April to May. But first, I want to announce the new eCourse. So what I've done is I've taken the concept of the eCourse 1.0 and revitalized it, revamped it, added information, added lessons, added exercises, and recreated the entire course into what's now called the Mind's Eye eCourse 2.0. Okay, and that is now live and available on my website. So if you're interested in getting into some of the exercises that have been very effective for people to start generating mind's eye experiences, that's one of the places you can go that's really easy to link into. The course is really meant to be the most in-depth thing that I've created thus far in terms of a digital asset that people can follow on their own. But some of the concepts in the e-course go even deeper than I do in my personal coaching. Now, this really is the culmination of 2 years of trial and error. You know, I've been whittling down what seems to work the best for people, and that's what you're getting in the e-course. You know, I will say this, though, that it's going to be really good for people that are experiencing aphantasia and hypophantasia, like lower mind's eye spectrum stuff, but not necessarily people that are experiencing hypophantasia wanting to move into phantasia or hyperphantasia, and definitely not people that are want to experience the projection style of visualization. We don't even really touch that in this course. So like I said, live now. Follow the link in the description if you're interested in jumping into that. I'm taking students right now. And next, it's time to talk about the case study that I ran back in April to May. So I'm really excited to be releasing this information. I wish I could have released it sooner, actually. I just had to kind of plow out and I wanted to finish that e-course before I did anything else. So I knocked that out. It was a lot of work. But now that that's done, we can start talking about the case study. And that was a lot of work too. And it was a lot of fun and had some great results. So super stoked to get some of these results out to you guys. Let's start knocking down the details of what went on in the case study and how it went for the participants. Okay, so first let's talk about what were the parameters for the study. And specifically, what were the parameters for participant selection? Here's how it went. So I interviewed 19 individuals total. Out of those 19 individuals, I ended up choosing 5 to participate. Now, one ended up not being able to participate, and it was pretty late in the game, so I didn't end up filling that spot with another person. And it was meant to be 4 completely aphantasic individuals and then 1 hypophantasic individual. Okay, but one of my people that was supposed to participate, who was aphantasic or who was experiencing aphantasia, ended up dropping out. And so it ended up being 3 aphantasic individuals and 1 hypophantasic individual. So that's what we ran with. Now, in terms of what I was looking for in the participants as I interviewed them, I wanted to make sure that they indeed were experiencing aphantasia, at least as objectively as possible. It was just through conversation and feeling out where they were at. So I really dug into their thought processes more than I normally do. You know, I like to keep people comfortable on calls, but this kind of put that to the wayside and really dug into how they were thinking to make sure that they were, you know, processing thought like an aphantasic individual experiences. I wanted to make sure that they were not confused at all about what aphantasia actually is and that, you know, they indeed were experiencing it. That being said, along the interviews, some ended up realizing, oh, well, I'm not as aphantasic as I thought, you know, which of course would automatically disqualify them from participating, but they found a lot of value in just getting that clarification for themselves. So at the end of all that, I narrowed it down to 4 participants that were experiencing aphantasia and 1 extra person experiencing hypophantasia that I wanted to include as well. And since 1 dropped out, then we end up having 3 aphantasic individuals and 1 hypophantasic individual. I also wanted to make sure through the interviews that they were really up for the challenge. You know, it was going to be a lot of time. It was going to be a lot of commitment. They were going to have some requirements that we'll talk about what was in the actual program that they were going to have to, you know, make good on. And to a certain extent, they were going to need to be comfortable being in the public eye. So they knew that I will be sharing their first name and some, general details about them, but nothing personal, of course, nothing that would allow anybody to look them up or anything like that. So they were going to have some sort of publicity from this. Now, the reason why I wanted to do that specifically for this program, I just wanted to foolproof it and make sure that we know that, hey, these are real people that are having real experiences that made actual progress, and here they are. And the other thing I'll mention before we start talking about the participants themselves is the idea of breakthrough. Now, how did I define getting a breakthrough or having a breakthrough within the program itself? So the way I define breakthrough is anything that stands out in their thought process that's outside of what they normally experience. Now, typically, of course, we're expecting visual breakthroughs to happen, but sometimes those kind of moments could happen with other types of mental senses and stuff. But specifically, we're looking for the visual moments that stand out that are outside of how they normally process thought, and that's what we call a breakthrough. So first we had Cece, age 40, profession, college professor. Her mind's eye status when she started, aphantasia. Then we had Briana, age 23. Her profession is an artist. Mind's eye status when she started, aphantasia. Colin, age 39. Profession, artist, musician. Mind's eye status when he started, hypophantasia. And then we had Angelina, age 29. Profession, doctoral student in clinical psychology. Mind's eye status when she started, aphantasia. And like I said, the way that I knew that they were indeed experiencing aphantasia is because we really grilled into that thought process. And then the questionnaires that they filled out beforehand also gave us somewhat of a measurement of how they were experiencing their thought life beforehand. So in terms of what the actual case study entailed, here's what participating was like for these individuals. First, they were required to sign a consent form, just consenting to the case study itself, with the knowledge that their first names were going to be shared and all their details of their surveys and stuff were going to be shared as well. In terms of what forms they filled out, there were pre-forms and post-training forms, okay? The VMSQ was a big part of that, and that stands for Vividness of Mental Senses Questionnaire. Now, that's a questionnaire that I developed myself that was based and inspired by the VVIQ. We'll talk about it more specifically in just a minute. And then the surveys beforehand had to do with where their mind's eye was currently at or how they processed thought before. And then afterwards, they also filled out a survey at the end too. So we set out to do 4 sessions for each participant. And there was an agreement that if they needed more to reach their first breakthroughs, we would do more. But nobody did more than 4 sessions. So that gives you an idea of how it went. And the sessions between the students had mostly the same exercises, if not all. I'll have to double check on the future videos that I'm going to release on this, but I'm pretty sure everybody did the same exact set of exercises, if not just a little jumbled up in order and such. The students were also instructed not to practice in between the sessions. I didn't want them to. I wanted their only practice to come from the sessions themselves, so all of them were successful in not practicing in between as well. And then the last piece was a post-training face-to-face interview where you'll actually see those in the videos upcoming. I'm going to release 1 episode for each participant, and you'll get to meet them face-to-face. Just hear their story. Okay, so in terms of the VMSQ, I'd like to talk a little bit about that before we jump in. Now, I created this, and I was inspired by David Marks, and he was the guy that created the VVIQ, Vividness of Visual Imagery Questionnaire, back in 1973, and then he updated it in the 90s, and that's what we have now, which is the VVIQ 2. And the VMSQ is kind of similar, except with some, modern takes to it. Okay, I wanted to not only measure visual aspects of the imagination with this thought process, but I also wanted to measure other mental senses as well, just touch on them anyway. So the VMSQ has 4 different scenarios that they walk through mentally, and then each scenario has 8 main categories that are the questions after each scenario. Each category is rated out of 10, 1 being only the thought of that thing in question, and 10 would mean they experience that thing as if it's a first-person experience. So if you're thinking of, the color red, it would be as if you could see the color red. The categories specifically go like this. There are 4 categories that are visually based, and those categories are animation, clarity, detail, and saturation of the mental scene. And the other 4 categories are about the other senses. So spatial awareness, audio sense, tactile sense, and olfactory sense. So mostly the questionnaire measures the visual aspects of the imagination, but it also touches on the other things. Okay, so now it's time to look at the individual results of each participant. So Cece, here's her VMSQ scores. Her pre-score before we started training was 77. Now that's a total across all of the categories, all of the things added up, every score she gave came out to 77. And her post-score was 68. Now, at first, looking at these two numbers, it may seem like she did worse at the end, right? Well, what happened there? Well, if we take a look at the visual categories only, her visual category score added up was 21, but afterwards was 44. So in fact, her visual categories jumped up enormously throughout the case study program by the end. And when we get to their individual episodes, I'm going to be releasing their whole scores broken down, so you'll be able to see what I'm talking about there and the categories themselves. The other senses, it seemed like they got much less attention the second time through when she took the VMSQ again. It was like all her attention now went to the visual aspects of what she was thinking about. And her first breakthrough that we noticed was on day 3, and then we continued to build from there. Next up, we had Briana. And Briana's VMSQ score when she first started was 32. So she actually gave 1 for all of the answers throughout the whole thing. She didn't feel like she had any sort of mental sense access whatsoever. And her post-training VMSQ score was 55, so she made quite a significant increase there. And if we take a look at her visual category score specifically, pre-training, the total was 16, of course, because she gave all 1s, right? She didn't have any awareness of any visual aspects in her mind whatsoever. Post-training jumped up to 34, so she made quite significant progress throughout the course of the program. And her first breakthrough that we noticed was on day 3. So it took 3 sessions for her to get there. Next, let's take a look at Colin's. So Colin's VMSQ scores when we first started, pre-training, was 65. Now, when we ended, his score didn't really increase all that much. It was 66. And yeah, it's a seemingly negligible score increase, right? Now, his visual category score was kind of a similar story. So we started at 40, and then after training, it ended at 43. So not much of an increase there. Now, what was interesting with Colin, though, is even though the scores didn't represent that, his reports of what happened, especially after we finished the questionnaires and the training entirely, his reports of what he was experiencing in his mind's eye were pretty drastically different from where we started. So the scores didn't represent that, but his subjective, reporting absolutely did. And you'll be able to hear that from him on his specific video. And his first breakthrough happened on day 1, actually. It was quite subtle, but we did recognize a moment on day 1 where he was like, oh, this is a little bit out of the norm. Last but not least, we have Angelina. And Angelina's VMSQ score started at 90, so she wasn't completely baseline, but most of the visual aspects were quite low for her, of course, because she was experiencing aphantasia. And her post, believe it or not, jumped up to 217 total. Now, this is a drastic increase, and this doesn't happen all the time. I've only seen it a few times, and I'll share a ton about why we think, her increase was so drastic when we actually get to her specific video. You get to meet her yourself, right? But suffice it to say, sometimes there's more aspects to the mind's eye than we may realize that are going on that are holding it back. And we'll really dive into that, like I said, in her specific video. So her visual category score on the VMSQ, if we take a look at that specifically, her pre-score was only 20. And then when we finished training, her post-score was a whopping 92. So massive, massive increase there to what she was able to access in her visual imagination. And she's also unique in that we only got 2 sessions through the program, and then we decided to, scale it back because stuff started to open up in her mind's eye a little bit too rapidly for her in a sense. And so we both decided, for her best interest, we'd scale it back and then just finish out the program with the questionnaires and the interview. So really excited to talk more about her unique case. She was very interesting to work with, and she really had a blast doing the program, so she'll have a fun story to tell. And her first breakthrough, like I said, happened on day 2, and that's when after that we called it and ended up wrapping up the program. Okay, so the conclusion of the case study, it was a massive success. 4 out of 4 participants were able to experience something visual that was outside of their normal thought life experience. 3 out of 4 participants saw an increase to their questionnaire scores, the exception being Colin, but each participant reported some mind's eye activity even after the training had ended. So they each got breakthrough, and post-program, they were still experiencing new things within their mind space. And next up, the next few videos I'm going to release are each participant's individual videos. You'll get to meet them a little bit. You'll get to hear firsthand their own stories of where they started and where they finished. And you're going to hear excerpts from their sessions. You're going to hear the story from each of them in their own words, from their own mouth. So I'm really excited to release those videos. You can keep your eye out for those to be released sometime in the next week or so. So make sure you stay tuned. This really marks the first time that progress has been documented to this extent. So please, if you find this information valuable or exciting, share it around. Let people know that people are actually out there making progress. And it's reasonable to think that you can too. So that's it for now for the case study. Again, like I said, there's more to come. We're going to release videos of each individual participant and their story and their experience. So be on the lookout for that. Again, eCourse, link down in the description. And if you like the content on the channel, if you find it valuable, if it's helping your own journey with aphantasia, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate that. And we'll see you next time. All right, bye.